Hi, and welcome to another episode of Kasper On BI. Today, I'm very excited to talk to none other than Alberto Ferrari. And today, as you can imagine, we're going to talk about DAX. We're going to talk about teaching DAX / learning it, best practices, debugging. What are his best practices when he debugs, when he has a performance problem? What are the things that he does when he gets to a point that he needs to figure out where a performance problem is? So that's going to be very interesting. So with that, let's just go listen to the Maestro himself. Let's go to the episode. Hi, Alberto. Amazing to see you. It's been a long time since we actually see you in person. We used to see each other more, but I guess, conferences are starting to come up again. So that's good. Can you give a little introduction for those, probably no one who's listening or seeing this, who doesn't know who you are?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. I'm Alberto Ferrari. I work at SQL BI with Marco Russo, and we do all stuff related to Power BI, Tabular, and DAX. We write books, we do training, we do a bit of consulting, but we mainly are in the education path. So we teach DAX, we write books, and we do everything about DAX. I'm a super geek, so I love go deeper on details and teach DAX the right way.
The right way. Okay. So
before we go, the right way, that's important.
So today we're going to talk a lot about DAX and debugging DAX and some tips and tricks. But before we go there, where did you start? Like, I like to ask people, where did they start before they, like, I know you from before I worked at Microsoft as like the MDX guys. You were already that too.
Yeah.
But how did you get started in that world?
By that word, you mean business intelligence or specifically DAX, Tabular, and stuff?
No, I think business intelligence, that would be good to start with.
Well, business intelligence, that goes a long way back. I was the CTO of a company, and then I quit the company, so I decided I needed to change my job. I took a year off just to spend time learning and deciding what to do next. And during that year, I visited most of my friends. Most of them are geeks, as you may imagine, just to see what they were doing and if I liked that. Among the many visits, I visit Marco, and that is the first time I saw a pivot table ever. I immediately fell in love with that. So I spent the remaining part of the year learning Kimball, learning methodology, learning how to build data warehouses. And then I started working on that. At the beginning, it was just integration services, loading data and building data warehouses. And then we start working more with MDX. That is when I met Chris Webb, when we started writing books about MDX. And I spent a lot of time with MDX trying to figure out how it worked. And I had to tell you,
your book on MDX has saved me so many times when I was still doing MDX models long time ago. But I used it. I had it next to me on the desk, and I used it so many times.
So. Yeah, but I think MDX was it was a nice language, really hard, not an easy language at all, very complex. But I think what was really missing in MDX was the educational path. If you wanted to learn MDX, there was a gigantic book, I don't remember the title, written by several people, among which there was Chris Webb. It was hard to read, and it was not intended for users that had no clue about MDX. It was a reference book. It was not a learning path.
Yeah.
Then we wrote this second book with Chris. That was good because it contained a lot of examples. Very thin.
Yeah.
I remember because when discussing with Chris, he said, "I want this to be the second book that somebody reads about MDX. So they should have some basic knowledge about MDX." And we try to go a bit deeper without going into too many technical details. And it was good. So it sold very well. But still, I think that if you wanted to learn MDX, the only training that I can think about was Chris training MDX.
Nico Jacobs from Belgium.
Okay.
Yeah. And he
But
used
anyway, there were not a lot of material. If you wanted to learn it, it was a hard path.
he used Theo Latchev's book.
Yeah.
That's the one. That's the one I thought with.
With DAX, it was a bit easier because of the availability of information. So you had a lot more information, a lot more possibilities to learn DAX. And also from the timing point of view, now we have videos. Videos were not very popular at the time, so
No.
we were not used to learn
We had
through
Moshe's
videos.
blog. That's it.
Yeah, but Moshe's blogs was really hardcore.
I know.
You needed to spend days. It's like if you look at Jeffrey's blog right now, it is so densely packed with information that I can tell you that reading one of Jeffrey's blog, I can write a couple of chapters out of a single blog.
Yeah.
Because Jeffrey is incredibly compact when he says something.
Yeah.
Whereas you need to explain things slower and do the things so one after the other. Introduce concepts one at a time.
I do keep pushing him to keep writing blog posts. He said he was like not doing it as much. I said, keep doing it because it's a wealth of information for everyone around us. Like everyone learns.
But I think Jeffrey should, I mean, I'm not here to tell Jeffrey what to do, of course, but I would really love Jeffrey to write extremely technical blog posts where he can share the level of information that he has in a very compact, short way. And then leave to us, and to us, I don't mean myself, I mean the entire community of bloggers, the task of reading, understanding, spending days trying to figure out what he meant in a single sentence, and then push it to the general public so that we provide examples, so we learn and we have information.
Yeah.
I don't think Jeffrey should write simple blog posts because there's plenty of people that can do that. Whereas Jeffrey's skills are unique in the depth of knowledge he has about the tool and how it works.
Yeah, because he wrote most of it. But yeah, so you started MDX, and then because I think at that time you guys were mostly doing consultancy, right? Mostly.
Yeah, we were mainly doing consulting. We didn't have we didn't teach. We were no teacher at all at the time. So we were doing mainly consulting from the beginning to the end of the data warehouse. And then it was not Power BI. When Power Pivot hit the market, I do remember the past summit when Power Pivot was shown for the first time. I didn't like it. I thought it would become a mess and nobody would use it. Looked like a toy. And at the time, we just finished writing the book about MDX. So I was also tired of writing. But talking with Marius, Jeffrey, and the team, they asked us to learn Power BI, to learn DAX, claiming that there was a market for writing books about DAX. I didn't want to do that because I didn't believe in the product. But I remember we wrote on a napkin, we were at dinner at the time, we wrote on a napkin the reason why Power Pivot would have been a great hit on the market. And on my fly back with the first bits of Power Pivot, my goal was to destroy the reasons that were written on that napkin. So to clearly write an email explaining how wrong it was. And at the end of the flight, I was convinced that actually Power Pivot was a good tool. It was not a toy, it was a powerful tool. And then we started learning DAX really the hard way because there was no documentation, there was no theory. I mean, today people talk about the raw context and the filter context. And what I think most people don't know is that when we started, there was no idea what the filter context or the raw context were. The very term raw context and filter context were not actually terms. They were not words. They were just the way the engine worked. So we had to spend a lot of time trying to understand, try to build a theory out of.
I mean, it was that bad. I still remember in 2009 or something, I wrote a blog post on some DAX thingy, and Amir was in there answering questions. Like that's how little information there was at the time.
Yeah, and What I was really lacking was names. Like, I mean, we know what context transition is, but I remember the first time I understood that something was happening between the raw context and the filter context. I needed a name for that. So how do we call this stuff? How do we uh, describe the algorithm in a clear way? So we spent a lot of time learning, and I remember talking with Marco when we decided to learn DAX. We also decided that the best way to learn it was to write a book. If we were about to write a book about DAX, we needed to learn it the right way and not miss anything. So that is how the first book about DAX went to the market. It was about Power Pivot.
Yeah, I probably still have it here. It's behind me.
Yeah, it's probably the first book we ever wrote. But at the time, we spent most of our time explaining the product because we wanted Excel users to understand what Power Pivot was, what business intelligence was, what a pivot table could be. So I would say that around 50% of the book was about the tool, and the remaining part was about DAX. So that always left us with that that feeling that you wanted to say more, you wanted to describe more about the language, but there was no time to describe it. There were not enough pages to describe whatever we wanted. That went for a while with Power Pivot, with Tabula. We wrote
And then
2, 3
Tabular came
books.
because you wrote a book about that too. That's probably the one
Yes,
behind you there, no?
exactly. It's let me see. No,
Oh.
no, there I have only DAX patterns and the definite guide to DAX. But again, also at the time, we didn't have enough pages. So when you write a book, you know you need to tell in advance how many pages it will be because that drives a lot of choices in the market. And if you need to dedicate like 50, 60% of the pages to the tool, where to click and how to build the model, then you don't have enough pages for DAX. And we spent a lot of time with the dream of a book only about DAX. And keep in mind, we didn't know DAX. That is something that, to be honest, that we need to state. When I wrote the first book, I didn't actually know DAX really well. There were a lot of details that I was missing, and I learned it during the years.
Well, I
As
really
of today,
appreciate the work that you guys do when you're writing this book about DAX because you're really like, I've been around seeing you do it for many years. You guys really go in depth and try things out and figure it out. And I always seeing the emails from you and Marco, like, okay, we did this, this, and this. Why is this happening? I didn't expect this to happen. So, I mean, you guys are really doing amazing homework. So that's definitely big.
yes,
kudos.
but still, I can tell you that before the definite guide to DAX, so any book we wrote before the definite guide to DAX, I was totally scared by all selected, for example. All selected is a function that I didn't understand before writing the definite guide to DAX. I knew what it did. I had a clue about its behavior, but all the stuff about shadow filter context and stuff like that I didn't know it. I simply didn't know the details because nobody ever wrote about it. Then we decided to go for the definite guide to DAX. That was a very interesting journey because we wanted the book. We wanted to write a book only about DAX. So we went to the publisher saying, we would like to write this book. And their feeling was, well, but a book only about the language, that is not likely to sell well. We are not sure. The book needs to be about the product. So I remember that day because out of nowhere, I didn't know why I said that, but I just look at the publisher saying, listen, maybe you are getting it wrong. We are not asking the permission to write the book. We are going to write this book. So either you publish it or we find somebody else. But this book is going to be written. And so they accepted that, say, okay, let's give it a try.
Yeah, good.
And the title was interesting because we spent hours, maybe days, discussing the title until during a discussion with the publisher, he just asked us, so if you were to describe the book, what is the content of the book? And I say, well, what I want to write is the definite guide to DAX. I say, okay, that's cool. Let's name it this way.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, we started also doing the first trainings because, writing a book you don't earn money from books. You just earn your name. People start become popular because having your name on a book gives you visibility. But we decided to start doing some training. At the beginning was about only Power Pivot. It was insane, like a 2-day training with no exercises, where we pushed all the knowledge we had only in 2 days, killing people. And then we slowly switched from consulting to training, and then more training, and then more training again.
Yeah.
As of today, I would say that most of my time, the vast majority of my time, is in training and in preparing the content for the training, because training is not just going in the classroom and teach. I would say that more than 80% of the time is preparing the stuff that you need to teach, preparing the content, writing the book, understanding more.
And probably the downside is these days, Power BI changes every week. So like you have to keep updating. Like in the good old days, you had like 5 years in between, but nothing changed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, but that's the reason why we never did a Power BI training. We did a lot of training about DAX because DAX doesn't change so quickly. It's very, very slow in the adoption of new features. Power BI it changes really every week. You have a menu option in one place and then it suddenly goes somewhere else. And the features are so fast in being delivered. Doing a training about Power BI is really hard. You will probably spend most of the time updating the content again and again. DAX, on the other side, is slower. And that's the reason why we focused on DAX and data modeling. These are the two topics that we cover the most.
Like there are really like Power BI. Maybe I'm just overgeneralizing now, but Power BI is really 3 main things. It's it's data modeling, and DAX. That's okay.
Yes.
And of course, I forget something that me as a data geek forgets a lot: data visualization. That's also an important topic. That we kind of like give us our DAX measures, how you visualize it. So we don't care.
Yeah, I always say, I compute a number, then it's your task to make it pretty. I just give you the number, and once it's there, my job is done.
Yeah, it's funny, but so you're covering like 2 out of 4. So like the heart.
Yeah, but M would require a lot of coverage. So to me, a good description about Power Query, about M, about how to shape the data, that would be needed. Chris has written a book about M.
Yeah.
There are a lot of resources about M out there. So there are a lot of people that do that. We thought about also doing a training about Power Query, about M. But to be honest, we do not have time to cover everything.
Yeah.
So at some point, you need to make a decision. DAX, just DAX, nothing more than DAX, is already enough for the 2 of us to work full time. Data modeling is another step. If we were to write something about Power Query or stuff like that, it could not be that neither me nor Marco, we don't have time to cover it. And then you need to learn it really well. I cannot say that I'm an expert on M. I know how to use it, the basic level, but I'm a really user.
There's a lot of tricks in there under the covers that are happening that many of us don't really know. So let me ask another question. Like one of the things I discussed in the past with Rob Colley and also with Jeffrey last time is that we're talking about the evolution of DAX, and you said it's going pretty generally, but I am still DAX 1.0. Well, and Rob says there's DAX 1.0 and there's DAX 2.0. And DAX 1.0 is the traditional way of like just using calculate for a lot of things. If I look at a lot of your for example, your scenarios these days, if you go to like DAX patterns, and sometimes I just go there and see what did these guys add, and I just look at the DAX, and this is not the way I would write DAX. Probably your way, because I didn't evolve with you.
Okay.
Because you guys have like use variables and tables and things inside of measures that were not available in the past. So really, when we started getting variables and be able to get like iterate over tables inside of the evaluation, things became much more interesting, but it also became harder, I think. Even though it's easier to solve complex problems, it looks harder. So Rob called it DAX 1.0 and DAX 2.0, which I think is a pretty interesting terminology. How do you see this? Or it just happened?
Well, you need to think about DAX. DAX is a functional language. Now, functional languages are beautiful from a theoretical standpoint because my master thesis when I was 24 was about functional languages and stuff like that. So I love functional languages, but they are really hard because if you need to describe an algorithm, you need to describe it as a function. And that function needs to compute a value that wherever you are in a matrix or in the space that you are projecting your number into, computes the right value. That is not the way humans think. That is not the way we tend to describe processes or doing anything. If you need to teach your kid how to ride a bike, you don't provide a function that evaluated when he's on top of the bike gives him information about what to do. You start step by step explaining how to do simple things in a procedural way. Do this and then do that and then do that. If you need to cook anything, you don't have a function that says, oh, you want to build, I don't know, tandoori chicken. This is the function that computes it. No, you provide step by step the individual steps that need to be executed in order to cook your chicken.
Like M.
Like M, yes. M is a split into individual steps. Now, with variables, I think they introduced the capability of splitting a complex calculation into simpler steps. You first compute a variable, call a couple of functions, you obtain a result, and then you go on the next step, and then you go on the next step, and then on the next step again. Every step you solve a smaller problem. That gives to humans the capability of splitting a very complex problem into simpler ones, and that gives you a lot more power. It turns a functional language into something that is a bit more procedural, and that helps a lot in developing your algorithm.
No, I can definitely see. Yeah, I can definitely see the need for it and why it's useful, but yeah, it's quite interesting to see how it evolved over time.
Yeah, I think it evolved just because people started to use it, and I don't know whether the team had this in mind when they created variables. Because I do remember when I saw variables for the first time, I was excited because it was now possible to do calculations that were not possible before.
Yeah.
Having the capability of storing a value in a variable and then use it later when you change the filter context was awesome from the point of view of the algorithm. You could compute values that were not easy to do before. But then what happened is that we didn't use variables for that. We used variables to split the process into smaller steps. And to that extent, I think variables are really gorgeous. Besides, when you do debugging, when you want to understand what is happening in your code, having the capability to return the value of a variable or to inspect it, for example, with Tabular Editor, the value of a variable at a given point in time gives you a tremendous amount of information about what is happening and where the problem might be.
Yeah.
So variables really changed a lot the way that.
So don't you think like a lot of the materials that we see out there today, like everyone talks about the most complicated problems, like some of these things that you guys have in the DAX patterns, I mean, it's pages of DAX, it's like, it looks also very complicated. And of course, it needs to be, because it's a very complex problem. But many problems are not that complex. The majority of the users that are out there are just doing very simple things. So do you think it might, and especially from seeing them every day in your trainings, do you think it scares them? It makes that harder for them?
Probably yes. And probably it's our fault, because if you ask me to write an article or record a video or doing anything, of course I like to do complex things, because they are more challenging, they are more interesting. I always tend to think, well, I do things that I best fit to. So if I need to explain how to compute a very simple calculation, well, there are tons of people that can describe that. So what's the point? What's the value that I'm providing?
We want to see you on TikTok, Alberto, like short videos, dancing.
Dancing, yeah. But I need to cut my beard. I need to remove like 30 or 40 years of my age. And besides, I also need to learn dancing. Dancing is definitely not my best skill. The first girlfriend that I had when I was 14, she left me because I wasn't able to dance. So probably that shock stopped me from ever learning to dance again. So no, you will probably never see me dancing and doing TikTok with short videos. Even though I mean, I appreciate that. I really love when youngsters find new ways of teaching, new ways of making it fun.
Yeah.
Finding something that seems boring, and it actually can be a lot of fun.
It's really hard to even if you look at Patrick and Adam's videos compared to mine are an hour and we just talk and do stuff. They have to do a lot of work to get like that information like in 10-minute video.
Yeah, exactly. And make it fun and send the message and just focus on one topic, because that's the thing that you want to teach and nothing more than that. It's a lot of work, and I really appreciate people that have the skill to do that. But I also know that that's not my cup of tea. I cannot, if I try to be more engaging or try to do any kind of joke, that's not me. That would be something different. So that's something that I learned recording videos. I just need to be myself.
Same here.
I do what I do, and if you like it, then you watch it. If you don't, then you simply skip it and go to see something different. What works for us, for example, the unplugged videos, which I didn't think they would work at all, they actually are nice, because you just have the camera, but you do not focus on the attendees. You just do your job, make mistakes all the time, and maybe spend 20 minutes to describe something that can be described in 5 minutes. But you show mistakes, you show problems, you solve problems on the fly. And having the capability of following the entire reasoning helps people understand how we solve the problem. And a lot of people like those videos and they appreciate them. Yeah. No, TikTok and short videos, they are definitely not for me. It's like in a conference. I never go to lightning session because I cannot deliver a session in 5 minutes or 10 minutes. I'm not able to focus on a topic and go for 5 minutes and then say hi. Yeah. I want at least an hour where I can slow down, I can talk and take my time to describe things. That's not the way youngsters learn, but
yeah, makes sense.
That's the problem.
If I see my daughter, phone, everything at the same time, short attention span, and it's completely different.
Yeah, but despite that, they learn. So in a way, they are able to pay attention to a lot of things at the same time and still learn something. I'm not that guy. I can do one thing at a time. I'm definitely a man on that. I can do one thing and no more than one thing, and I need to be very focused on that. I remember I was arguing actually with my ex-wife about the fact that women are able to do multiple things at a time, and We as men, we cannot do that. We can do one thing at a time. And at the time, I believed she was wrong. So we were arguing in the kitchen, and she asked me to put some water on the fire because we need boiling water to cook pasta. So I did it. I just filled, I don't know how do you call the pot with
Mhm.
water, put it on the fire, and then start watching it. And she said, "What are you doing?" "I'm waiting for the water to boil so I can put pasta inside it." And then she starts smiling, say, "You see?" I mean, I was there, and just because I was waiting for the water to boil, I wasn't able to do anything more. I was just there waiting for the next step.
Mm.
Whereas a woman, in the meantime, she does a lot of different things.
Mm. Yeah.
And a youngster does the same. As your daughter, my kids, they spend a lot of time on the phone and they are constantly switching. They're very quick in paying attention to something and losing attention.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Whereas
So
I'm definitely much slower.
so let's go back to the DAX and the training. So how did
Yeah.
the training change over time? I think I attended like two of your trainings over time. Don't think I've attended anything recent, but I did see how did it change over time?
Well, the very beginning was insanely dense. It was 2 days with no exercises. You just listen to us talking for 2 days about concepts that you have never seen. And people were knackered at the end. They didn't have any option of actually, we didn't give people the time needed to learn it properly. Then we added exercises and we start to slow down a bit. Exercises are extremely useful also because they give you the time to relax a bit. And I know sometimes people during the exercises, maybe they do something different. They just check email or they do a couple of exercises and then they slow down, which is absolutely normal. Our brain is
Yeah.
not designed to absorb so many information in a short amount of time. And then we made it simpler over time. At the beginning, it was we wanted to tell everything in 2 days. And over time, we just cut a lot of advanced stuff in order to give more time for the basic stuff. So it's actually simpler today than it was at the very beginning. And the choice we made last year was to always provide, for example, the video training to people that attend the in person training. That gives us the option of cutting entirely some sections from the training because if you don't see that while we are in person, you have the option of watching it later. So I provide the full content, you can learn. But during the in person relationship, we just focus on the basics, the foundation, the theory, which is the foundation of everything. And that is what is missing in most DAX students that I meet.
Yeah. So
They
who is the
don't
average
know
student?
everybody. Really everybody. I have that's something that still impresses me. I When I started training, I always ask how long people have been using DAX before attending the training. And the values range from 3 months, maybe 3 months, up to 5 years. So I have people that attend the training that have been using DAX for 5 years. And I always smile like, so what's the point of attending a training about DAX if you've been using that for 5 years? You're probably an expert about DAX. But what the common denominator of all the students is that they are lacking the theory. They know, they think they know what the filter context is. They think they know how to correctly evaluate a DAX expression, but they never spent enough time learning the theory and only the theory, nothing more than the theory. So there is a value for people that attend for the first time and people that have been using DAX for 5 years. And both the type of people and anybody in between uh, get something out of the training. If you already know DAX, then you add more. So you add the theory,
Yeah.
you understand better why your code wasn't working before. If you're entirely new, that is probably overwhelming, but at least you start with the right foot. So you start learning it right, and then you will have time to practice later.
So what is the
What still
hardest thing?
strikes me is,
Yeah. So what's the hardest thing for them? What is the hardest thing for them to grasp in your trainings or from DAX?
well, that strongly depends on the type of students. Students that have spent already a lot of time with DAX, the hardest thing to me is showing them that they don't know what they believe they know. It's like you know nothing, Jon Snow. That's exactly the first day is designed for that. A lot of code, a lot of examples, asking questions. I spend a lot of time asking questions, waiting for the answer, because I know their answer will be wrong, but I want them to reach the point where they look at the DAX code saying, okay, now I get that I have no idea what I'm looking at. So I don't know how to predict the value of a formula.
Mm.
I write code and I just wait for them saying, okay, before I hit enter, I want you to tell me what number is going to appear here and why. And that is the hardest part. Everybody's waiting for me to press enter because they want to see the result. But that's not what I want. I want them to tell me before what number will be there. After the first day, it's depressing for most people because you end thinking that you actually don't know what you need to learn. But that is the moment when you are ready to learn. Because at that point you say, okay, so maybe Alberto has a point and we need to think in a different way.
It sounds
so
like
the second and the third day,
these old kung fu movies where the master first kicks you completely and then you're like lying in the corner, and the second day you're ready to learn kung fu.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, from the second day, your mind is much more open. So you are there saying, okay, so I failed on the first day. Now on the second day, we start learning. And then we talk about the filter context, the raw context, the context transition. These are not hard concepts. And I can tell you the first day, the hard part is breaking. So stopping them, making them understand that they need to learn in a different way.
What is it that you always
From the
say?
second,
DAX is simple but not easy. Is that it?
yeah, DAX is simple but not easy. DAX is, because it's simple. There's nothing complex. Once you know DAX, there's actually nothing complex. Every single concept is simple. What makes it hard is what people struggle from the second day on, which is you cannot forget any detail. There are some rules, there are some details that you need to know. Individually, they're easy to grasp and master. But when they're all together, and that happens as soon as you write a couple of calculating a formula, it's incredibly easy to forget some of the details. So starting from the second day, we start writing DAX code together. Most of the DAX code is wrong at the beginning. And the exercises are all about let's understand, let's not fix the problem, let's not fix the code, let's understand why it's wrong. And once we know why it's wrong, then we fix it later. Because everybody's experience is that if a formula does not compute what you want, you add calculate here, there, you just change something and suddenly, automatically, it works. But to me, learning DAX means understanding those details, being able to predict the result of a number, the result of a formula. And once you can predict it, then you have the skills that are needed to write any piece of DAX code. Yeah. Still, sometimes I struggle, like everybody. I look at a piece of DAX code and I have no clue why this number.
I had this question. What's the hardest for you? What's still a challenge for you?
All selected. All selected is still the function that scares the hell out of me. It's very complex. It's very, very hard to understand. I wrote a lot of articles about all selected because I wanted to understand it. And I can tell you, whenever I think that I understood it, there's always an example that actually creates more problem. The two things that still creates me issues, that means I can spend a day looking at a piece of DAX code without any clue why the result is wrong, are using all selected the wrong way or in an advanced way, and auto exist. AutoExist is my worst enemy because it's really hard to understand
And
why the number is.
it's not really a term that we use a lot in the tabular world, AutoExist. Of course, in multidimensional world, it was everywhere. We don't really use it a lot in the tabular world, but it's still relevant.
It's still there, and it's responsible for a lot of raw numbers. Mostly uses the canonical user of a single fact table that has everything inside it. So not a Kimball model, but everything in a single single table. That is where AutoExist gives its best to mess up your numbers and destroy your understanding of calculations. So AutoExist, if I had the option of killing it and removing it entirely from the tool, that would be lovely. A lot of problems would disappear. All selected is needed. There's nothing we can do to avoid all selected. Even though maybe as soon as visual calcs will be available, then all selected will be probably less useful because now you need all selected to grab the grand total from the visual. These are the things that still creates me serious issues. I think I'm pretty good at writing DAX easily, but when I have a measure with all selected somewhere, the chances of making mistakes are still quite high.
All right, so let's go to the next. Like someone comes to you with a DAX expression that they have, and it says, I'm not getting the wrong results. Like they're giving you a DAX challenges. Where do you start? What are the steps you take?
Okay. That's funny because I never start from looking at the DAX code at all. The first thing that I ask is, what is the expected value? And this goes to the biggest mistake that most people do when they try to write complex DAX code. That is, they work with the production database or with a real database that contains hundreds of millions of rows. And the thing is, they have no clue about what is the expected result. You compute a value, you obtain a number, and you have no idea whether that number is right or wrong. Worse, if the number is wrong, you have no idea why it is wrong because it's just a random number that makes no sense. So the first step ever is always to say, okay, let's forget about your database. Let's build a model that contains 3 tables with 10 rows each, no more than 10 rows each. Numbers are 1, 2, 3, 4, so we can sum them with our mind. We don't need to do any kind of complex math. And then on top of this model, we write the code and we look at the result. If it's right, we can easily tell it's right. If it's wrong, because the numbers are so small, you can easily understand why it is wrong. Maybe it was wrong because a filter didn't work. You were expecting 12, you get 15, so the difference is 3. You just look in those 10 rows where 3 is, and you know why that number was used instead of being ignored.
Today, when some customer calls you and says, we have this problem, we're not getting the right results, you don't even look at their code?
I typically ask, well, I took a look at the code. Maybe the problem is very simple, but as soon as the problem is a bit more complex, I just open Power BI, I build a model on the fly with just the 3-4 tables that are needed, and I write the code there. Because as a consultant, what I find it hard is first understand the business logic. You typically get like 20 lines of DAX code with funny table names. People do not pay a lot of attention to the names of the tables and columns. So the names do not tell me anything. I don't understand the business rules which are behind that. And it's really hard to do any kind of debugging with such a scenario. Whereas if you only have 3 tables, customer data and sales, and nothing more than that, with 3 columns each, because that's all what you need, then we write the code together. We write the code on the proof of concept, so we just write the algorithm, and we only focus on the algorithm, not on the numbers, not on the value, not on performance at all. Performance comes later. Once you have the first version that works, that is when you can start working about performance. But you do not focus about performance at the beginning.
Yeah.
And then once I have the algorithm clear, then the next step is, okay, now take this algorithm and move it to your specific model. So mostly my consultants are, my sessions are first a description of the problem that I receive the information. Then we spend like half an hour building the proof of concept with just basic tables with Power BI, nothing fancy.
Yeah.
In the process of writing the code, the users understand the algorithm. So we focus and we write the algorithm, and that closes the first call. But I always leave it as a task to users. Okay, this is the algorithm you want. You have followed how we build it together. Now your task is move it to your model. Make it work on your model with the knowledge you have.
Yeah.
I would say 90% of the time that is enough. The problem is solved. There's a 10% of times where we missed something. So there are still border case scenarios or things that do not work. And the process is the same. So they tell me, well, we didn't take into account that maybe some data contains duplicate values, or we have a scenario where a customer is lost and then returns back. There are a lot of scenarios that you miss at the beginning.
Yeah. Real world is messy.
So we do the same process. We go to the simple scenario, we add more data, or we add a couple of columns or a table or whatever. We make it a bit more complex. We solve the scenario on the test model. And then once we understood how to solve it, their task is to move it to the real model. Mostly the people that I see struggling with calculations, they are working with the wrong model. They are working with a gigantic model with tens of tables, a lot of columns, millions of rows, and they spend most of the time trying to understand why the number is wrong, but they have no clue whether that number is actually right, wrong, or if it is wrong, by what extent, or what are the values that make it wrong. So the best suggestion that I can give to anybody if they want to debug their code is stop working on your production database. Don't do that. Don't spend your time trying to fix a calculation on a real model, because the time you spend to build a proof of concept is really well spent.
Yeah.
And then you will focus on the algorithm only, and later you bring the problem to the real database.
Yeah, makes sense. I actually do the same. So
yeah, because it's actually more productive. So with a smaller amount of time, you have a good understanding of the problem and you fix it once and forever, instead of trying as desperate to make it work without knowing whether it's right or wrong. Then, yes, we do have tools. You can inspect the value of variables. You can use Tabular Editor 3 to inspect the value of a variable in a given filter context and understand more. You have Evaluate and Log that gives you information about what is happening. These are all useful tools. But the real tool is make it simple.
okay.
Work with the simplest model ever.
This is really good advice. So, but that's about like getting the right value. Now let's talk performance. Like, okay, now we got it to the right thing, but it takes 20 seconds.
Yeah.
To get here. Now what?
Then you have a problem. Exactly. Now, when it goes to performance, that is harder. Let me tell you, first, if you want to work with performance, you need a slow measure that computes the right value, because as soon as you start changing it, you want to make sure that your changes do not break the algorithm. So you want some calculation that takes forever but provides the correct value, so that you can change the code and still get the same value. You need to test it. Performance is harder. If you work with performance, there are some rules. If you work with performance, well, the first thing is that you probably, the first thing to check is that you are not using direct query. Otherwise, performance is going to be a problem with a much harder solution than anything else. So if you focus about performance, that means you are working with Vertipack. And if you are working with vertical, then it's time to understand better. The problem with performance is that Tabular Power BI is extremely counterintuitive. Improving performance do not follow common reasoning, do not follow common sense. You cannot just guess what the engine will be doing and change the code and make it work. That works in a lot of scenarios, but it doesn't work at all with DAX. If you want to understand performance, you need to be able to run first different versions of the query. You need to understand the query plan. You need to understand concepts like materialization, how data is handled, the storage engine, the formula engine. There are a lot of details that you need to master. So it's hard. Obtaining a fast calculation is hard because you need to go at a very technical level. You need to run the query, understand where the problem is. That is not very easy because from the performance point of view, we have a lot of information. We have the query plans in DAX, so you can look at the query plan, but
I think
they are so
only
hard,
you and
so long.
Marco can read it.
Not even us. I mean, don't believe that we know all the details about the query plan because they change very quickly.
Yeah.
The amount of information is massive. And mostly it's not useful. You can optimize the code without understanding the details about the query plan.
But probably, and let me know if this is true. In my experience, the majority of the performance things have nothing to do with the DAX, but actually with the model that is, like we were talking about this before, auto exists and things like this. Like, okay, if you just do a nice dimensional or a snowflake instead of like having a few big tables, and you use the relationships that are inside of the model to do a lot of the filtering, like that solves a lot of problems, but many people don't know. And so what are common things that you're seeing in this?
Well, mostly the worst type of model you ever see is the single table, where you have a table that contains everything. And it is a nightmare because any kind of calculation there is a serious problem. And just scanning anything from a table containing a lot of rows takes forever. Then you have the spaghetti models where you have like 100 tables in a single model with a very complex chain of relationships. There, it's nearly impossible to understand the interaction between tables. What happens when you place a filter here? How does it propagate the right way? That is, again, a nightmare. Then I guess everybody knows that I'm a big fan of bidirectional relationships. If you want to mess up your model, just start using bidirectional relationship here and there. And the complexity of the model becomes even harder, up to the point that you can no longer predict what number will be generated. The rule is extremely simple. Just do a star schema, whatever kind of problem you have, and I really mean whatever. There's quite always a star schema that solves it. It might not be evident at first sight. You might need some time to figure out that how to build a proper star schema. But if you can, and if you reach a star schema, then performance is quite never a problem. I still have to see performance issues with a properly designed star schema. And the other thing that a lot of people don't think about performance is that cheating is absolutely allowed. If a number is really, really hard to compute it, then you can pre-compute it. You can create calculated tables. You can create structures that help you in showing the value in a very short amount of time. I mean, if you have a report that is executed by all of your users that shows the new customers by month, why computing it all the time? The new customer is an extremely heavy calculation. You can pre-compute the value at the month level. You build the report in a snap. So as soon as the user reaches your landing page, the report is there, ready.
Yeah.
And it's incredibly fast because you are cheating. You didn't have to compute the numbers. They are already pre-computed. And if the user wants to go deeper and start filtering, then it's time to write the code in a different way.
I still remember, I think you and Marco came up with this, I don't know how long ago. I think it was at SQL Bits. I was still living in the US, like 2015 or something, or about, you had the 1 billion row table session. I think that was what it was called.
Okay,
That's where
yeah.
you started talking about like doing types of operations like this.
Yeah, but if you think about that, aggregations, we now have aggregations in tabular. We had aggregations in multidimensional.
Yeah.
They were, and they still are the key to good performance. But that's cheating. An aggregation is a number that is already computed, and you give the feeling to your users that you are extremely fast in computing a number just because you know it in advance. I mean, I don't know about what happened in the Netherlands, but when I was a student and um, I was being tested, you needed to provide answers, and
Yeah.
that is when I used to write on my hands the most common answer to all of the questions. So if the teacher asked me something, I just pretend to think about something, but I was actually reading on my hands the answer. That's exactly what Power BI does with aggregations. It knows the most frequently asked questions, so it knows the answer in advance. If you go deeper, then of course you need to start computing values. So pre-aggregating values is absolutely crucial to large models. Then you have that is if you have a very large model. With small models, mostly the problem is a poorly written DAX or DAX that is written in a naive way.
Yeah.
They're
The, w-
just changing some
the way I
some
usually
details
say
about the
this
DAX
is,
code.
yeah, the way I usually say this is they just don't think about the model. They load everything and then in, and then they start to have to resolve to DAX gymnastics to get the right number. And this is where you get
Yes,
problems.
that has a very strong roots in the fact that everybody now wants quick answers.
Hmm.
So you have some data in your data lake and you want to get insights from the data. You don't spend time shaping the data in a different way and building a data model that solves the report and that is fast.
What's actually also, you know what, quite interesting is like I used to do this session about understanding relationships in Power BI,
Yeah.
and you guys also did a lot of the basic. But these days, I mean, for us it gets boring because I've done this session for years, so we kind of stopped doing it. But if you go to conferences, no one talks about the basics anymore. It's not there. Everyone wants to talk about the new shiny features, but no one talks about
Yeah.
the basics. So, and even last time, I think last year I submitted some of this. Okay, let's go talk about the basics again. They just don't get, like, they're not sexy enough, so people don't approve these sessions. So no one talks about the basics. So everything looks complicated, hard. While in a lot of cases, with some really basic stuff, you can get like the things that you and I see. Like I work with some of the biggest customers, probably people who come to you, like they have interesting problems and questions, but the majority of the people doing things in Power BI have small models and like performance not really a problem. If you just take a few minutes to think about the basics, as you said, things become much easier. But no one is teaching that to anyone anymore.
Yeah, that is actually true. And as I said, that's our fault because we like to do complex things. We think that simple things are boring, but
Hmm.
as actually that is not the case.
But
I
again, you
always
already talked
discover
about
this.
this in 2012 or 13. Like that hasn't changed. The basics really hasn't changed. So do you go repeat this every year? Of course you do it in your training, but like on the public, if you go to a conference, you're going to talk about some new sexy feature, and that's what conference organizers want to hear, and that's what people want to hear. They don't want to hear you talk about the basics again, but like 40% of the audience is pretty new, and they could really learn about the basics.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, but I think we probably should record more videos about the basics, just basic stuff, simple stuff. Because I mean, we are experts about DAX, but there are so many fields where we are totally not experts, like gardening, like how to correctly glue two pieces that you broke, or how to drill a hole in a wall, or do stuff like that. I discovered myself watching videos which are incredibly basic, because I'm totally not good at doing any kind of homework. And I appreciate so much that somebody has spent time explaining the details or cooking something. When you need to cook something, that's the first time that you have to do that. I discovered myself at 56 watching a video how to properly slice a chicken breast. When you buy it full and you need to slice it, it's not easy. I
No,
mean,
no.
it's probably very simple if you are used to that. But if you are not, just watching somebody that shows you step by step how to do that, say, oh, okay, now I'm becoming a chef.
Yeah.
We should probably do the same with DAX, with Power Query, with data modeling, showing very, very basic stuff, so that people also get satisfaction. They have the feeling that they are learning the proper way, simple things. And we're always guilty about that because, of course, we want to talk about the shiny new features, but the basics, that is probably, by the way, the area where we can provide more value, because the basics are so profoundly known by us. So we take them for granted all the time.
Yeah.
And we should probably be good at teaching them.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. So let's talk about some of the, I think we kind of already talked about this. So what recommendations do you have for people who are starting a new Power BI project? Of course, the database, it's already there, so you don't, but what would you do?
Well, the first thing that again goes back to the basics. Talk to your users, understand what the requirements are. Mostly the requirements are simpler than what we believe, and understanding very well with the users what they want to compute is extremely important. Then build a proof of concept. Don't work with the real database. Don't even try to load data from there. If it's really simple, you can just load data and start building the calculation. But if it is not, then don't focus on the database that you have, because the database that you have is just the starting point. You need a data model to solve the problem. So just focus on that. Build a perfect data model that will solve the problem with no constraints. You are not tied to the shape of the database. These are your requirements. You want your data model to contain those tables, the relationship, and this data structure. You build your DAX code there, you build the proof of concept, you understand how the calculation needs to be done. And then the next step is to move the database that you have to your proof of concept. And that might be hard. It might be the case that you need to reshape your data, or you don't have the tables the right way, or the data is duplicated or not present at all. So all these are challenges that you discover and that you need to fix.
And then
But
when you
the
show
mistake
it
that
to business users, they come up with additional requirements or,
yeah,
oh,
of
it's actually
course.
not what I mean. So how do you take that into consideration?
I don't know, but no, I know, because that always happens. That is part of the normal development. So building the perfect model the first time is just impossible.
Yeah.
I don't remember who, maybe Imon or somebody else, that said that the normal experience is that the user asks you to build a report, you build exactly what you were asked for, you show it for the first time, and the user sees and say, that's exactly what I asked you. And now that I see the numbers, I also know and understand that that's not what I need. I need something different. And so that's an iteration that goes several steps before you reach the actual report, the report that the user wants. But luckily, if your initial project was not too far from the result that the user wants, then you can always adjust the code and change and massage the data. That's BI is very iterative. You need to start again and again multiple times until you reach a good level.
Yeah.
If the requirements are completely different, then it's time to start again. It's actually a new project. It's completely different. The thing is, ideas are not clear mostly when the database is simple, is small, and then users didn't have time to think about the problem. But in my experience, when a user has tens of billions of rows, they have a very clear idea of the number they want to extract from those billions of rows. So you can actually focus on making it super fast immediately, because you know that the problem is not the complexity of the fuzziness of the requirement. It's actually the amount of data. When you reach billions, it's a really different game. It's no longer playing on the street that becomes professional, and that's completely different.
The laws of physics changed. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Things that seem simple, like scanning a table, you don't even think about, oh, I need to scan a table. But if it's 10 billion rows, that takes a few seconds just to scan it. So you cannot scan it multiple times. You need to find ways to make it faster.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, if you need to start a new project, first talk with the user, understand the requirement, build the proof of concept. Don't even think about touching the database until you understand very well the numbers you want to compute. And then try to build a model. But don't focus on the source database. The source database, that is just the starting point. What you probably need is not the source database, it's a different data structure. So you need to build it, you need to create it. It's the difference between a tree and a piece of furniture. You want to build a piece of furniture, but users provide you with a tree. And your task is to transform the tree into a useful desk or a useful armchair. That's our task. So you need to understand what kind of desk the user wants. And you don't just take the tree and give it to the user saying, hey, this is your desk, because that is not a desk, it's a tree.
Makes sense. So what about learning DAX? How would you approach that? Obviously, go to sqlbi.com and start there, but
Of course, just some ads.
But yeah, how would you approach that?
That strongly depends on you. I'm a book guy, so if I were to learn anything new, I would start reading a book, because that's the way I learn. I need my time. I need to sit down. I need to do exercises slowly. I need to test my knowledge step by step. I'm not a video guy at all. I get bored very, very quickly watching somebody talking with a video.
Hmm.
So the way I would do that is by taking a book and start to read it. A lot of people like videos, so that's fine. They can go and start watching videos. So my suggestion is don't watch random videos searching for a quick answer, because that's not going to help you. Don't try to derive knowledge from examples, because it's wrong. You need to first have a solid understanding of the theory. And the only way to build a theory is to not focus on real problems, but focus on examples that have been designed to teach you that specific aspect. When you want to learn the filter context, there are a lot of examples that we and other bloggers wrote designed to make you understand that. So focus on that. Understand the filter context, solve problems like they were puzzles.
Yeah.
Once you have a good understanding of the basics, then it's time to look at the examples. It's time to see how pros solve their problem, understand their code, and then make it yours. That takes time. There are people that like to do that through books. There are people that like to do that through videos. There are people that like to do that through trainings. Whatever your media is, so whatever your choice of media is, take your time. Don't think you will learn DAX in a couple of weeks, just because it's not going to happen. You need to shape your brain in different ways. And I see the struggle. Several times I had students that are completely new to DAX. They arrive at the Master in DAX training. They have 3 days. And after 3 days, their boss expect them to start going production and start writing DAX. It cannot work. It doesn't work that way. You need time. You need to learn and to practice. And you need to have time to make mistakes.
Yeah. So so that's starting learning from scratch. But what about people who already know DAX? Or like you say, you have some people at 5 years. So let's say I would like actually, I would probably be a good. I probably should go to your training and like because I'm still old school DAX. I don't use a lot of the variables. I don't really write DAX anymore on a day, like
Okay.
not very regularly. So what are some of how do you keep up to date to the DAX world? And what are some of the concepts that you should learn?
Well, I think if you stop using something, then over time you will lose the knowledge and the new stuff. I was used to be a developer once in a many years ago. If you ask me today to develop anything, I don't even know where to start. I don't know the tools. I don't know the new technologies. I don't know how they work. So with DAX, it's the same. If DAX is your full-time job, that is good. You will probably spend a lot of time learning new details and new things. If it is not, you probably need from time to time to spend some time writing DAX, maybe for your personal reports or just because you want to keep up to date, and probably solving scenarios or solving problems and tricky calculation is the best way. For example, if I wanted to learn complex DAX code and some optimizations, I think it would be nice and challenging to go to DAX patterns, the website where we provide a lot of patterns, take some example and try to make it faster. Maybe you succeed. That would be good because everybody will learn something. But in order to make the code faster, you will need to understand the code, understand the details, and then with some creativity, try to find new ideas. It's a brain teaser. You need to think a lot in order to solve the problem, but it would be good.
Yeah.
If anybody comes with a new version of the returning customer measure that is faster than ours, that would be lovely.
Yeah.
Because we spend probably weeks optimizing that code. If it can be made better, I'm super happy.
Yeah.
And the guy that made it better is probably happy too, because in the process of making it faster, they will have learned so many things.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. I looked at that code. It's like a masterpiece of DAX writing.
For example, there is the new offset function. I still haven't played with that a lot, but I'm incredibly curious to see if it can be used to optimize further some code. I'm pretty sure it can be done, but I don't know the details, so I never tried that enough.
No, me neither. I'm pretty excited about what that's going to bring. Like again, a new thing to the toolbox. And as you said before, like because I remember when variables were introduced was something you probably remember the names was called Super DAX. And it was Super DAX. It was to improve the queries being sent from PowerView to the tabular model. So we introduced variables under the covers to do, but as soon as we got variables, it got picked up and people started using it in ways that we never imagined. Probably we did a little bit, but it was not designed for this. And this is probably the same thing with this offset function. Like it was out and people were already playing with it and seeing. So it'll be interesting to see what people will come up with.
Yeah, but that's one of the things that I'm planning to do, understanding what type of calculation can be improved by using offset. And then we need to understand if any other function like offset is there and how they can impact the performance. I expect there will be some impact. I don't know the details because we need to spend time testing and playing with that. So far, the only thing we know about offset is the syntax. So we need more about.
Yes, makes sense.
And there's also the entire set of functions that are using composite models. Group cross-apply, group cross-apply table, all these functions, we have no documentation. So I'm just waiting to see how they work, because maybe there is a chances for improving performance also there. Yeah, that there are DAX functions. So once they are there, we can start using it.
Makes sense. All right,
and
cool.
The promise was as soon as composite model go GA, we will have documentation. I'm waiting for that.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of work. So last question.
Okay.
What has been the most exciting feature of Power BI released in the last year for you?
About Power BI, I would say that field parameters are probably the best feature from the user point of view, because they are really well implemented. The kind of query they generate is very, very well designed. They are fast. They are not perfect, of course. There are areas of improvement, but already in the first version, they are super cool. They make it very simple for users to switch both rows, columns, and measures in a simple way. I would say they are some sort of light version of calculation groups. So with calculation groups, you can do a lot of things, probably more than the average user needs. Field parameters, I really love them. They are simple, they are effective, they do their job, and they solve a very practical and simple problem. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind. Maybe the thinking about that a bit more, there might be something more interesting. But I totally love field parameters.
That makes sense. Well, cool. I think we're well past the hour, so that's really good. Usually I keep it at 1 hour. Probably we can keep talking for a couple of hours, but
Yeah,
I really want to thank you for your time. It was
thanks to
great
you.
to see you. Great to talk to you as usual. I'm probably going to get you back, like when we get some new DAX functions, we can continue our discussion.
For sure. It's always fun to chat about these topics.
Yeah. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, everybody. And remember, enjoy DAX.
And that concludes another episode of Kasper On BI. I really enjoy talking to Alberto. It is always good to hear from the master and hearing about DAX and someone who's really thinking about it all the time, continuously. And what are some of the lessons that he learned, some of the best practices. So that's really good. If you like this episode, there's always more coming. Hit the subscribe button. If you like the episode, hit the like button. This is the last episode of the year with a guest. I'm planning one more to just looking back at 2022 and what happened and what was going on. Next year, a lot of cool ideas are on the plate. So with that, thank you for your time, and I'll see you next time.